radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. How you doing? Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah. How you doing? Today's Tuesday, September 11th, 2018. 257 days into the new year, just 108 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? All right. Tonight we have a very special guest with us because this is our September 11th 9/11 special, and our guest is Justin Deschamps. That's right. We're going to discuss every angle, every aspect of what happened back in 2001. We're going to do it all tonight on the show. Maybe we'll get some answers. We're going to put everything on the table. Tomorrow night, Kelly Sullivan Walden is here, and the dream expert, right? Tomorrow night, we're going to discuss your dreams, and we are also going to take your phone calls. So that's tomorrow night. Thursday is another Fader night with open lines all night long. John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom live, and followed by, open lines all night long. And Rappaport is on the East Coast. He is in the line of fire with Hurricane Florence, but apparently is at high ground. So there you go. Last week he was on special assignment. This week he is really on special assignment, but he says he's going to be okay. All right, I don't know what that means, but I tried to get more information out of him today. But he says he's good. He's good for the show. I said, okay. All right. Not to disclose where he is at, but he's in the Washington, D.C. area. I'll say that. He's right in there. Okay. So that's Thursday night. Yeah. I'm a big social media guy. I hang out on social media. And a few years ago, one of the Fadernauts came up to me at, I'm not sure an official fade or not, but let's just say somebody came up to me at a conference and said, Jimmy, one of the things that we really dig about you is that you really do hang out on social media. It's not somebody else. I said, yeah, for the most part. Yeah, that's true. I said, but I enjoy it. And he said, it's just so much fun, and you're always there. And I am. And you can come and find me on social media. You can find me over at onstellar.com. And if you're not registered over at OnStellar yet, the next great social media platform, get over there, get registered. OnStellar.com. It's amazing. Twitter, at JChurchRadio. Facebook, YouTube, you know what to do. And you can go follow, like, and subscribe right now. At JChurchRadio on Twitter's where we hang out. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. And hashtag F2BQ is where you can post your questions throughout the show. And I know that tonight it's going to be very active. I get that. So post everything that you need for me to see in hashtag F2BQ. All right? So Rappaport is in the swamp. I said he's near the swamp. He's got to be, man. He's got to, keep your enemies close, right? That's what you do. That's what you do. All right. You can email throughout the show, Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Lots to get to tonight, so I'm going to get straight to it. Breaking news today. A fast radio burst from a dwarf galaxy 3 billion light years away is, wait for it, repeating its signal. The unknown object is called the repeater, also known as FRB 121102. And it is the only known FRB, fast radio burst, to have emitted multiple bursts. Now, here's a direct quote from the press release today. Quote, FRBs from 121102 originate in a dwarf galaxy 3 billion light years from Earth, but the nature of the object emitting them is unknown. There are many theories, including that they could be the signatures of technology developed by extraterrestrial intelligent life, end quote. The results of the team's research were published in the Astrophysical Journal yesterday, Monday, September 10th. Jerry Zhang and the Breakthrough Listen team observed 121102 for a total of 5 hours at the Green Bank Telescope, collecting 400 terabytes of data. The team were initially able to pinpoint a total of 21 FRBs, all of which took place within a 1 hour period. The team using, now check this, the team using neural networks developed advanced machine learning algorithms to further examine the data and have found an additional 72 bursts which were previously undetected. And that is some really big breaking news. Also, check this out. I was sent this today. The National Solar Observatory in Arizona was evacuated by the FBI, and the nearby post office was also evacuated. The place was roped off, and no word was given as to why this was done. The local sheriff has no idea why the FBI rolled in and took over. So my contact who sent me this information, being an avid solar observer, had a few phone numbers and started to call the techs at the observatory. He finally got a hold of 2 of them, and they told him that it was a security risk area and that they were told to leave and don't come back until they were told to. Now, why would there be a security risk at a solar observatory in the middle of nowhere? A spokesman for the Otero County Sheriff's Office said that they are not involved in the investigation, but they confirmed it. Rod Spurgeon, a spokesman with the United States Postal Service, said, and I'm quoting, "Right now, what we're told is that they've temporarily evacuated the area. We haven't been told why or when it expires." Now, isn't that interesting? Turns out that going through the story, a couple of little blurbs from the area, and yes, the FBI came in on Thursday last week and shut everything down. Roped off, literally police taped off the area and the post office. Nobody has been allowed in or out since, and we have no new information as of today. Today is Tuesday. Think about that. Crazy. Have anything to do with these FRBs? I don't know. It's crazy. Crazy. I'm going to stay on top of the story, though. And I do have somebody in the area. I've got a source. So we will see. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. It's just $2 a month. Click on the podcast banner over at Jimmy Church Radio. You can also become a Fade or Not in the membership section on our site. You can go and do that. And also, while you are there, check out all of our sponsors by clicking on their banners over at jimmychurchradio.com. All right. Let's get this show cracking. Happy birthday to today, Harry Connick Jr. That's right. Harry Connick Jr. today is 51. If he's 51 today, how old was he when he did Independence Day? That's 1994. Let's do the math, right? Wow. Wow, he was like 35. Today he is 51. Well, OTD on this day in history, 2001, at 8:45 a.m. on a clear Tuesday morning, an American Airlines Boeing 767 loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. 18 minutes later, a second Boeing 767, United Airlines Flight 175, peered out of the sky, turned sharply towards the World Trade Center, and sliced into the South Tower at about the 60th floor. An hour later, American Airlines Flight 77 circled downtown Washington and slammed into the west side of the Pentagon military headquarters at 9:45 a.m. Less than 15 minutes later, the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. At 10:10 a.m., hijacked United Flight 93 crashed in a rural field in western Pennsylvania. 20 minutes later, at 10:30 a.m., the other Trade Center tower fell. On this day in 2001, fader fact, only 6 people in the World Trade Center towers at the time of their collapse survived. Tonight, we have a very special guest. It is our September 11th 9/11 special event, and our guest tonight is Justin Deschamps. We're going to discuss every angle of what happened that day, all of the theories, all of the ideas, and everything is going to be put onto the table. Tomorrow night, Kelly Sullivan Walden is joining the show, and we are going to discuss your dreams and take your phone calls all night long. Thursday's another Fader Night with open lines. John Rappaport is going to be here reporting live from the hurricane on the East Coast, followed by open lines all night long. All right, now, let's talk for a second. I can only sleep with something on. Today, it's the radio or something playing on a Bluetooth speaker on my nightstand, right? If it's too quiet, my brain just gets too busy and I can't sleep, right? If there's nothing distracting me from my brain, I'm serious, my mind. If I don't have that in the background, my mind goes all over the place and I'll stay awake. And so if I have something on, I can concentrate on that, and it'll pull me in that direction. I can fall asleep. But back in the day, I kept the TV on all night. I have my own reasons for that, and you know that. But I can't do it today because the TV that Rita and I have in the bedroom is ginormous. And it's like having the sun in your face, right? Well, it's great to watch, but you can't fall asleep to it because it's that big. It's huge. But back on September 11th, 2001, that TV was on all night. And I remember dreaming. And, hearing all over and over again that a small plane had crashed into the top of the World Trade Center. And this was in my dream. And I woke up and I looked down at the foot of the bed, rubbing my eyes, and I saw the smoke coming from the top of the World Trade Center, right? And I don't know what was on the Today Show or, something was on. And I'm like, what's going on? Well, that morning I did what the rest of America and the world did. I watched the events unfold in what seemed like rapid fire succession, and it didn't stop. At around noon Pacific time, I got in my car and headed to my office in Santa Monica. And for some reason, I didn't take the 405 freeway, but instead, I went over the hill. I took Benedict Canyon. I stopped in West Hollywood, and then took Santa Monica Boulevard through Beverly Hills, heading west into Santa Monica. And I only bring this up because I remember the Beverly Hills courthouse was already surrounded by National Guard troops as I drove by. And I found myself in this weird, strange, surreal dream place. It was just bizarro. This strange world only happened to me once before, and it was the morning of the Northwoods earthquake back in January 1994. And yes, the National Guard was on every corner of my neighborhood then too. And it's a very strange thing to see. Well, when this kind of trauma hits you and takes you out of your normal daily existence, something else kicks in. Your brain is trying to make sense of it all, but it can't. Everything around you just looks different. And I remember just sitting and watching the 24-hour coverage on TV day after day, not getting any sleep, and nothing around me looked the same. Not my home, my car, my neighborhood, the drive to work. Everything changed, right? It was like the colors had changed and the mood and my mind. When events like this, happen, the sudden and intense life-changing events, they change you. And it's your brain trying to adapt. I'm making a guess here, but it's traumatic. And I don't know if anything will happen again in my lifetime that will cause that strange dreamscape thing to flood my senses. But it's also become a fear. That breaking news thing that flashes across the TV, right? And your heart skips a beat. Or we interrupt this program. When that happens on the radio and your stomach just twists up in a knot, or the ground starts shaking under your feet. Yeah, it's a fear. The funny thing is, we never know when these events may happen, and we just can't predict the future. But I know this. I don't want ever anyone to have the experience again. I don't. How many hurricanes last year? Think about that for a second. How many hurricanes? How many fires? Countless fires that have torn across this country. And people going through this trauma. Mass shootings. Las Vegas, right? Think about that. These are life-changing events. And right now, we have Hurricane Florence. It's bearing down on the east coast of the U.S. And as I speak to you right now, there are over 1 million people evacuating and going through that same strange, surreal world that I speak of. So today, on this September 11th, we're going to be discussing what happened back in 2001. But if you never went through a natural disaster, an earthquake, or a war, you probably did experience 9/11, and you know what it's like to have your world change forever. During the immediate aftermath and the years since 9/11, something just didn't sit right with me. And yes, I read all of the conspiracy stuff and I watched the documentaries, Loose Change. And although they all can't be right, one thing is for sure. We have not been told the truth about what happened. Two things that I just can't shake. There are two. Well, there's many, but there's two. First, how could the buildings just fall? How is that possible? I don't know if any of you visited the World Trade Centers back when they were standing. I did a few times, and I did go to the top once. But it seemed that every time I went to New York and I was with friends, we would always go to the World Trade. We would do everything, but the World Trade Center was one of those places where you went down there and just looked at these buildings, and you could walk into the lobby and the feeling of the might and the power and the strength. It's overwhelming because you just look up and they are so big. And you get the same feeling at, the Sears Tower, right, in Chicago. And for me, also growing up, it was Sears Tower and the John Hancock Building. And so when you're in New York and you're looking at these ginormous buildings that are everywhere, the World Trade Centers were just unbelievably big. They were big. They were square. They were just strong and tall. And I still don't know how they fell. That part I just can't figure out in my own mind. And the second thing that I can't shake is that our government knew about everything in advance. This is a very important point here, because the second point is the biggest conspiracy of them all, and it gets lost in all of the noise around 9/11. If anyone at any level in our government knew about what was going on and what was going to happen on that day in 2001 before it happened, we have a real problem on our hands. That's the real conspiracy. You can talk about thermite. You can talk about nuclear weapons. You can talk about holographic planes, doctored videos, right? Controlled demolitions. You can do all of that you want. But there is real proof that our leaders knew about it all in advance, whatever it was. And that's what scares me. The fact that someone knew and caused this country to go into that strange, surreal dreamscape and cause lifelong trauma is the real crime here. And you need to think about that seriously. When you go through something that huge, you change. Your worldview changes. Everything around you changes. You don't look at your friends the same, your coworkers, people on the street, when you're driving, everything is different. It's a different shade. And I remember specifically on 9/11 how it looked gray. When a thunderstorm and you got the gray clouds overhead and everything just goes into that sepia orange gray thing. That's what I went through. And I know that everybody else was doing the exact same thing. It's traumatic. And to put this population and much of the world through that kind of emotional drama and trauma, that's the real crime. It all tipped off for me with one single thing. right after 9/11. And I'm following the news just like everybody else, and I'm trying to absorb everything just like everybody else was. I was no different. But when every plane in this country was grounded and nobody could fly anywhere, my own mother had to drive from Columbus, Ohio to South Bend, Indiana, because my grandfather, her father, was in the hospital and was about to pass away. She could not fly. All the flights were grounded. And he passed away that week, by the way. And I couldn't fly home. So when all of those planes were grounded, the only flights that were in the air were the bin Laden family in private jets getting flown out of the United States. Now, that right there said to me, somebody knows something. Nobody's talking about it. And that scared me. And I knew then that no matter what the story was going to be, no matter how they were going to lay it out, that it wasn't going to be the truth. Now, I will say this before Justin comes on the show. It may be that it was just terrorists on planes that flew into these buildings and crashed into a field in Pennsylvania and crashed into the Pentagon. It just may be that that's all it was. Okay? All right? But our government and people in the government from the highest levels on down knew in advance that it was going to happen. That is the bigger crime. You can talk any conspiracy theory you want. You want the ultimate conspiracy? You want the ultimate false flag? It's that right there. And this is Fade to Black, and on this anniversary of September 11th, 2001, Justin Deschamps and I of Stillness of the Storm are going to discuss every angle of 9/11. Are we going to get answers tonight? We might, and I hope that we do. But what we need to do is continue this conversation. I'm going to be right back after this short break with our guest, Justin Deschamps. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. Truly bespoke radio for the masses. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Email is Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. I'll be right back after this short break with Justin Deschamps. Stay with me.
This is Nicole Church, daughter of you-know-who, and you're listening to Fade to Black on JimmyChurchRadio.com and the Game Changer Network.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at JimmyChurchRadio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can get our podcast for just $2 per month. All you have to do is click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com.
Times are changing. The circus of politics, healthcare's low standards and high prices, and let's not forget food quality. What to do? Arm yourself with Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. In a world of chemical imbalance and poor air and water quality, it's time you make a move. Log on to getthetea.com and stock up on organic non-GMO supplements. Don't forget the tea. Cleansing your body never felt so good. And we have a brand new tea called Takedown Tea, which helps support healthy glucose. All natural body support so you can be at your best, naturally. All you have to do is log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. We're not a fad that comes and goes. We are the real deal. Join us and armor up. Getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Changing America's health one tea bag at a time.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Do you want to lose weight but have no idea where to begin? The Fast Start Diet, a 3-day weight loss plan, is the answer. 3 days of nutritionally balanced, calorie-restricted meals delivered right to your door. No shopping, no measuring, and no cooking. Everything is prepared for you and ready to eat at home or on the go. The Fast Start Diet has all the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting without starving. We've helped thousands of people who have struggled to reach their weight loss goals. Isn't it time we helped you? With the Fast Start Diet, you'll lose weight and feel great.
Find Fast Start Diet on Amazon or go to faststartdiet.com and use promo code TALK to get 10% off your first box. And as a special bonus, Fast Start will include their #1 rated Lipo-3 appetite suppressant spray free with your order. This is Jimmy Church, and whatever your diet plans are, do what I did. Go to faststartdiet.com.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight is our September 11th 9/11 special event with our guest, Justin Deschamps. I'm dedicating this broadcast to Jim Mars, born on December 5th, 1943, passed away last year, August 2nd, 2017. Mars was a member of the Scholars for 9/11 Truth. And in 2003, his book, The War on Freedom, probed the alleged conspiracies of the September 11th attacks and their aftermath. And it was released in 2006 under the title, The Terror Conspiracy. Jim, I miss you every single day, and I hope you're listening right now. Our guest tonight is Justin Deschamps. And tonight is September 11th. And we are going to discuss the full story behind what happened that day in 2001. We will try to find out what may be the real truth behind the attack. Was it them? Was it us? Was it a combination of both? We're going to discuss all of that tonight. Justin was born in Portland, Maine, and grew up in the Boston area. As a physics, psychology, and spirituality student, he has been searching for truth all of his life, looking to make sense of all of the insanity of this world. In that time, he has developed a holistic body of knowledge, linking science, philosophy, and spirituality into a single framework of never-expanding understanding. He wants to share that truth to the world, becoming a teacher to some and a student to others. His goal is to help himself and others become a better truth seeker, and with his wisdom gained in the process, make this planet the paradise it was meant to be. That's right. His website is Stillness in the Storm, and I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, Justin Deschamps. Justin, good evening, my friend. How are you?
Good, Jimmy. Good to be back.
It's good to hear your voice, as always. The voice of reason. You center me, my friend. You center me.
I'm glad I have that effect.
Yeah, the student and the teacher that you are. Justin, on this day, I want to ask you first, take me back to where you were on September 11th, 2001, and how did you get the news?
Well, I was in college at the time. I was attending university at UMass Lowell in Massachusetts. And I remember I got up, probably like at 8 o'clock that day, something like that. I was going to get into school. I commuted. And a friend of mine called and said, "Have you seen the news?" I said, "No, I hadn't seen the news." So I go and flip on the TV. And of course, as a lot of people discovered, there was a massive event happening. I think at that point, the first tower was hit, and the second tower hadn't been struck yet, and just mayhem was ensuing. And I was in Massachusetts at the time, so it was a pretty catalyzing event for me. And I didn't really fully understand what was happening, obviously, at the time, because I hadn't gone through my wake-up experience yet. But I remember it being monumental. And my father was actually in New York at the time. Thankfully, he didn't have to deal with any issues. But so, yeah, that's how I heard about it.
Yeah, and looking back, you just reminded me, I had friends and clients that were in New York City that day about to film a music video. And they were at a hotel down the street. And when all of this happened, and I was desperately trying to reach out to a few friends of mine that were in New York City, but it was like impossible to get through. I happened to get through to a couple of friends, but it was tough. And watching, the other thing that I do remember, well, I remember all of it, but things that stick out of my mind was the mass exodus of everybody on foot, right? The columns and of people, on bridges and roads and just trying to get off of Manhattan. That was an unbelievable thing to see. I watched the buildings come down in real time like everybody else did, but it was some of the other things that I was just referring to, the surreal dreamscape that your mind goes into during events like this. And I cannot imagine what was going through the minds of everyone on Manhattan that day. Just an unbelievable traumatic event. Unbelievable.
Oh, what's so interesting about that, before we get into the conspiratorial aspects of this event, is I actually think the response of the people there in New York was one of those moments that reveals that we actually do have a good human nature. Because, these massive events happen, false flags take place, thousands of people die. It's arguably this huge tragedy. People's entire worldviews are shaken up. And instead of there being like mass murder and complete chaos, like you'd expect, there was people hugging each other. There's people helping each other out. You had a whole bunch of examples of people being humanitarians and good Samaritans. So I think this is one of these times where, you strip away the facade, you strip away all of the manipulated reality that we live in, and you get it down to bare bones at a psychological level, and the goodness that is inherent in most people just kind of comes to the fore. And I think that was one of the silver linings of this event for sure.
Ultimately, in your mind and your research, what do you think, the short version, we're going to discuss all of this tonight, the short version, what do you think happened on September 11th?
Oh, boy. Well, I would say that from a dark occult perspective, the 9/11 attack had occult overtones. It took place on September 11th, and 9/11 is significant from a Kabbalistic perspective because we're skipping the 10th Sephirah, which is the Ancients of Days, or Keter, which symbolizes usually the justice card or man's knowledge of the divine or divine law, the embodiment of law.
Okay.
So in that sense, from a dark occult perspective, what the event was an attack on the knowledge of law, the goodness, the true sovereignty that we have on this planet. And it was, I think, a declaration of war on the positive forces, the light forces. And so there's this battle that's been happening on the planet for a very long time. And the powers that be wanted to have some type of occult event that would signal to the people who had the eyes and ears to see that we are literally declaring war on the fabric of reality that governs, our interaction with the divine. So I think that's a really big thread that happened. It also happened on Tuesday, when Tuesday relates to the god of war. So it had those overtones of being an act of war on, the lawful side. And there's certainly other threads we could pull from, but that's one point I'll throw out there.
Well, let's stay with that for a second. Okay, so that's a very interesting point to bring up. Now, who would institute that plan on that day? Are we talking about bin Laden, or was bin Laden working with others? With this date was obviously planned in advance, and if they were using it for those significant reasons, who would have had? I mean, would bin Laden have had that knowledge? Right? Or
probably not. Yeah. I don't think bin Laden was aware of it. I mean, it's certainly possible he could have been one of these deep insiders. But I think there were a lot of people who got caught up in this thing. I think there were a lot of pawns that were just either quote unquote following orders or doing what they thought was beneficial. So bin Laden could have been one of these guys. He really did believe that a jihad against the West was a good thing, and then he was used as an operative.
So he was
bad actor.
Right. So he was given the date. The date didn't have significance for him. It was just a date.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The other, and then to lend credence to that, if I remember correctly, the building was started to be built. The plans began at 60 years to the day before the September 11th attacks in 2001. So there's a whole swath of evidence out there. You could go down a massive rabbit hole to suggest that they've been planning this dark occult ritual, this false flag event, for potentially at least the past 60 years, and arguably even earlier before that.
The reality of the attacks and the events and the enormity of it, for you, what was the first clue that there was something else going on here than what we were told?
Sure. Well, for many years I didn't really question anything. It wasn't until I had my wake-up experience in 2010 that I saw, I believe it was the loose change.
Right.
And I actually got to see the video footage of these explosions happening moments before the planes were hitting. And then you see these other explosions happening as the tower's collapsing, several floors down. You're seeing these explosions come out of certain windows. So that's when I really started to say, wait a minute, there's just something not right there. And then, I also thought about the physics behind it. Again, I hadn't really contemplated it because I just so readily accepted the mainstream narrative. But once my eyes were opened, I thought to myself, how often is it that a massive skyscraper that is literally designed to withstand the impact of large airplanes, how is it that that building gets hit, it burns for a few hours, and then it falls into its own footprint at free fall speed with almost no debris?
Right.
That's when I really started to question things. I'm like, wait a minute, there's way more happening here than what the official story is telling us.
For me, I get caught in this catch-22. And here is the catch-22, and I can't get out of it. Is that we have the events, and if I just take it as planes flying into the World Trade Center, hijacked by terrorists, that's one thing. But the other part of it is, besides the government knowing in advance, and clearly, factually, there is proof that they did. So you have that element of it. But if you want to stay with the narrative that it was planes that flew in, Okay, let's just say we buy into all of that. The government knew in advance and the planes flew in. We have this huge thing caught in the middle. They fell. The buildings fell down. And that's the part where all of this, any idea now has to get looked at, because I just don't see those buildings falling. And I'm going to ask you directly, before they fell, did you ever visit the World Trade Centers?
I did. I didn't actually go inside, but I walked through the little pavilion park they had in between them at one point when I was really young.
Yeah, and that's great, right? Because you got to see these buildings, all of Manhattan. You walk around and you see this great architecture, and they're huge, these streets, and you're walking down, all you do is look up, right? You're looking up everywhere. And then you get to the World Trade Center, and they were totally on another scale of size and strength. They were just huge. And
monolithic,
monolithic. I can't even still to this day when you go and think about that, there was just no way to me in my mind's eye that they just fell down. It's an impossibility. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, Rita and I went to Manhattan, and we went down to the memorial there, and where they have the two pools, the two fountains, the pools, and you look at the square where, the footprint of the building, and you look at that, and you look over at World One, and you look up at that, and you look at the size of it, and then you just imagine these two buildings sitting right next to it, that big, right, that tall, with that huge footprint going up, and it just doesn't compute that these buildings were actually there and brought down by planes. And that's the catch-22 that I find myself in. You can go with one narrative and you can accept that, but then you go into the other one that they fell down. That's where things started to open up for me. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing, is once you start putting the pieces on the table and you start looking at the available evidence we have, there's just glaring inconsistencies everywhere. I mean, the fact that they seem to be planned for many years in advance. I think, if I remember correctly, Silverstein, the guy who owns the lease on the building, he took out an insurance policy like a few months beforehand. You got Donald Rumsfeld going up there the day before and saying that a whole bunch of money's missing from the Pentagon budget. I mean, it's just item after item after item, and I think it's one of these events that stands as a glaring example of a manipulation on our world. So, I think the last time I saw a survey on it, I want to say up to 70% of people asked whether or not 9/11 was the official story was real or not. They said that the official story seemed concocted. So this is a massive wake-up event for a lot of people.
And the other, okay, now we're going to get into a lot of different aspects of this, but let's just talk about some of the facts that were pushed upon us that, for me, reeked of BS. I don't want to use, bad words, but just I didn't swallow the story. And that was the passport, right?
Right. Yeah.
Tsukami's. Okay, so we were told two things. One, that when those buildings came down, nothing was left. Right, everything was pulverized into dust. Not only bodies, but steel, concrete, phone systems, computers, whatever, safes, solid, whatever. Everything in that building was now dust, and somehow wound up in that little pile, right, in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. But the passport winds up on a sidewalk and doesn't get pulverized, right, and is found. Now, wait a minute. I mean, and so I backed up when that news broke. And he was identified, right? Now and I just thought to myself, people are believing this. I'm not. And I just sat back and I thought, this is going to blow this whole story wide open. People are going to question this, and they didn't.
Well, right. I mean, keep this in mind. I mean, this guy presumably had this passport on him. He's in an airplane. He uses the plane as a missile. The plane literally explodes. It hits the building. The floors that were enveloped by the flames burnt for hours upon hours upon hours. But somehow this guy's passport lands basically untouched on a sidewalk and is found within, what was it, a couple weeks? I don't even know if it was that long of a time. But they recovered this thing super easy.
Yeah. It was one of those things for me that the odds of, and that's what I always do, Justin, I just go like to a numbers game. I think, what are the odds of this happening? Well, I mean, what are the odds of you walking down the street and picking up a lottery ticket that's worth $300 million, right? That wasn't cashed. The odds of you purchasing a lottery ticket and it winning $300 million is one thing. The odds of one getting purchased and then lost and you picking it up on the street, now we're talking about a stupid number. Right. And that's where we are at with this, that the passport fluttered in the air, survived the flames, the fire, survived the collapse of the building. However it got onto that sidewalk, it did and was discovered. And that's just one in a huge long list of things that they are expecting us to buy. Now, let me ask you this about this passport. Is it possible that passport survived and was actually found by someone?
Sure, it's definitively possible. I mean, when we're considering possibilities, you always got to remember that anything is possible, but how likely is it? How probable is it, given everything that we know? I mean, the odds of something like that, a plastic and paper passport, surviving that level of heat and destruction is just so astronomical. I mean, like you said, you'd have a greater chance of winning the lottery by not actually buying a ticket. That's how unlikely something like that is, I would wager.
Now, okay, just so we can stay factual here. His passport was reportedly found by someone whose identity has never been revealed. Okay, on Vesey Street, and it was, I believe, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was actually found before the towers collapsed.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that's a glaring red flag.
So I'm just, you know, there are many issues that I have here, but that one, for me, was some of the things where at the very, very beginning of all of this, I just had to sit back and go, something is not right here. Something's not right, and I don't want to dismiss the tragedy. I don't want to dismiss the people that died. The firefighters and the first responders and everybody that was in that my heart rips out for everybody involved here, and I don't want to go down this road. But when things are this obvious, we have to sit back and go, wait a minute here. We need to start to question things, and nobody was willing to step up, and with the and still haven't really. I'm talking about outside of our circles. I'm just surprised. Right. The Senate hearings that were involved and everybody who was trying to point fingers and blame, but they weren't trying to look at really who knew what and what was really going on. That's the part that I don't know if we're ever going to find out. Now, we're gonna head towards a break here, but there's one other point for me that tipped the scales very early on, which is the flights in the United States were all grounded. Nothing in the air. Nowhere.
Yep.
But yet, the bin Laden family was allowed to fly out of this country on private jets. Now, wait a minute. Obviously.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Right. Obviously. I mean, that's the biggest red flag of all. Obviously, they knew that bin Laden was involved, and they had to get the family out of this country before what? Before what?
Right. Exactly. Well, at the point, why would they even suspect anything? Because
that's right.
It was so early in the game.
Before what?
So that's one of those points of circumstantial evidence we have to say, hey, wait a minute, guys, why is it that bin Laden's family is being flown out of the country before he's even named a suspect? Is it maybe because they already had him pinned as a scapegoat before everything happened? I think that's probably the most likely explanation.
That's possible. Again, see, and we don't know much.
Right.
What I'm thankful for, well, we don't know much, but yet we know a lot. What I am thankful for is, and I'll say it right now, when Alex Jones released Loose Change, it's not the facts that they attempted to present in the movie. That's not even the point. The point is, and what's most important here, is that they forced questions to be asked. And that's what's most important here. And so thankfully, Alex Jones and other theorists out there were courageous enough to just go back and look at this and go, hey, wait a minute here. We've got a lot of things. And once they started to pull on that thread, right, everything started to come apart and it pointed in so many directions. And now, as it turns out, we can look back that there were hundreds of people involved, hundreds of reasons. There was lots of motive, right, from so many different people, right, and things are not what they seem. So let's continue this conversation, Justin, and we'll pick up when we come back after this break. And again, I'm dedicating this show to the one and only Jim Marrs, who passed away last August in 2017. Who was one of the brave journalists out there that was willing to not only publish books but go on the record and speak about this. He wasn't going to let it go. Rest in peace, Jim Marrs. This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Justin Deschamps. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Follow Justin at Sits Show. I'll be right back.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied, but you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
Reclaim your active lifestyle with Angioprim. Angioprim is the original liquid oral chelation supplement. Chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in your veins and arteries that can cause blockages. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. Find out more. Go to angioprim.com. Talk to a trained consultant by calling Angioprim toll-free 877-882-7221.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can become an official Fadernaut by just going to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hey, it's Grace. Can we talk about something serious for a minute? Your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger, you know, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I only use night vision goggles from Bearing Optics. You can see your very own green chrome balls today by clicking on their banner at jimmychurchradio.com.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Justin Deschamps, Stillness in the Storm. Tonight is our September 11th, 9/11 special event. I'm dedicating this show to author, journalist Jim Marrs. And Justin, the first thing that I want to jump into is a point that you brought up earlier, which is controlled demolitions. And let's jump into this quite directly. What stands out for you first with the controlled demolitions, and why is that a possibility?
Well, I think the big thing that stood out for me is I saw some photographs of some support beams, and they had these sharp angles. I believe they were about 60 to 45 degree angles that just look like cuts, like somebody just taken a blowtorch and just carved right through this thing like it was butter. So that was a big indicator for me. And then I saw a presentation, I want to say it was an engineer. This was, God, it's got to be about 6 years ago now. And he had discussed, the thermite issue, that it appears that there were nanoparticles related to some byproducts of thermite there that are normally used in a controlled demolition. So you got those two pieces of evidence, but then you just look at the towers and the way they fell. I mean, if you just do even a precursory search online for towers falling or buildings falling, and most of the time when a building falls in its own footprint, it's because it was a controlled demolition. I couldn't find any example where a tower fell or a building fell and it fell perfectly in its own footprint and it not being controlled demolition. So those are the two big major points that I kind of cite as massive red flags for this thing being controlled demolition.
We had the one tape when Building 7, came down too as well, which seemed like a verbal instruction to go ahead and bring the building down. And that kind of stood out for me. I also thought that with the amount of force and the way that the ground was probably vibrating there, that it could have damaged some of the surrounding buildings, but nothing else really happened except for that. And it looked controlled to me, too, as well. I did see a controlled demolition in Las Vegas. I watched from Caesar's Palace. I watched a hotel across the street get blown up, and it was and brought down. It was pretty fascinating to see. What?
Yeah, that must have been a hell of a show.
Yeah, well, see but what this is my takeaway from that, and it's the same thing that happened on September 11th. In that, when you see buildings in a controlled demolition, you always see it in slow motion. Okay, they slow it down. You don't see it in real time. The building across the street, this hotel, I'm trying to think of the name of the hotel. But anyway, it was there and then it was gone. If you blinked, you missed it. It was literally that fast. It took a second, right? Maybe 2 seconds, and it was gone. And it was the same thing with the World Trade Centers, that they just came down so fast that it reminded me of what I saw in Las Vegas. So is it a possibility? Well, this is the thing, and this is what I wanted to ask you about that. To do that, you would have to go in for probably days, if not weeks in advance, and wire this building up, right? You would have to go in and get this done. Is that possible?
I mean, if you've ever seen, they've had a couple shows. I saw one a few years ago where they follow, like, crews to see how much prep work it has to do to bring down a building. I watched this one. I think the building was maybe 6 stories tall, and they were in there for like 6 months. They had to take the plans. They had to identify all the load-bearing structures. They had to go in and survey where those load-bearing structures were, find critical junction points, put a certain and specific amount of charge on those critical junction points. Then they had to time out those charges so that they all exploded precisely. So when you're taking down a building, it's not like you just fill the thing up with TNT and you light a match and you walk away and everything works out perfectly. That's not the case at all. Each explosion has to be perfectly timed, because what you're basically doing is you're engineering a collapse. What they try to do is they try to destroy the superstructure or the load-bearing structures in the center, so that there's an implosion type of effect, and then they destroy the rest of the building, usually in some rotational momentum, so that it actually spins into its own footprint. So, and that takes time. It takes serious amounts of planning. This isn't just, something you can throw together in a few days. So I would suspect for buildings as large as World Trade Center 1 and 2, the only way that I could imagine that could happen is if they were in there for potentially a year in advance, or, and this is another theory that I've heard, that they had charges placed and this controlled demolition infrastructure in place potentially years in advance. Maybe it was even built into the building when they started construction.
The idea of planes crashing in that high up into the building and then causing it to crash, that's where I scratched my head. And I looked back historically, had this ever happened before? And it turns out that it did. It happened in Manhattan with the Empire State Building. I don't know if it was a B-25 Mitchell or, B-17 or something, but it crashed into the top of the Empire State Building. Nothing happened. Then in Milan, Italy, we had a plane that crashed into, I believe it was a bank. Again, the tallest building in Milan, crashed into the top of the bank, caused a fire. It didn't collapse. Now, was it 20,000 gallons of aviation fuel? No. Was it that same situation with the World War II bomber, with the amounts of aviation fuel and stuff? The point is, the buildings did not fall down. And we have to look at that historically. There are other examples. The World Trade Centers aren't the only times that this type of event occurred. But there is something else that I want to back up and visit, which is the skill of flying a plane into a building. Is it,
yeah, that's a glaring point.
That's a big point. Now, I don't know about you, but I had Microsoft, whatever they call it, right? I had the flight simulator. I had all of them.
I remember those.
Yes, I had all of them. I had different versions of it, and I flew planes all the time. And it was difficult. It was difficult to land. It was difficult to take off. It was difficult to fly. Once you got it up in the air, you could kind of cruise around and feel safe. But trying to do anything deliberate in Microsoft Flight Simulator told me one thing: it's not easy. I've only flown one plane where I've taken the stick or whatever you want to call it and flew the plane. It's not easy to do. And these were small private planes. Is it possible for somebody that has never flown a jet to fly a jet at pinpoint into the side of the World Trade Center? We haven't even talked about the Pentagon yet.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, before I answer that, I wanted to actually say something to what you said earlier, which is that the fuel, if you take jet fuel and you burn it, it doesn't burn hot enough to cause structural deformations in steel. And what we saw on 9/11 was liquid metal. That was one of the things that was reported. So just the temperature differential alone between what steel can do when it's exposed to jet fuel suggests that there was something else happening there. So plain jet fuel did not cause the structural integrity of the World Trade Center to collapse. That being said, I mean, I think the total amount of time that these alleged terrorists had to train up on how to fly an airplane with doing some incredible maneuvers was maybe, I want to say, a couple weeks or a month. These guys supposedly went and trained up on this stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I played those flight simulators too, man. I had my old Mac, I think it was a 2C 90. I would play my flight simulator. I played Red Baron and all these ones, and man, you're right. It was impossible to do anything, super fancy in that. And they base these flight simulators off of the same simulators that the military used to train their pilots. So the fact that somebody could potentially take this airplane and perform impossible maneuvers and perfectly glide that airplane into this building, which is a very narrow target. I mean, when you're flying an airplane size, I'd imagine the amount of leeway you have if you accidentally make a mistake and then you're off of course is really tiny. So I would say it's astronomical that these guys managed to train themselves in a couple weeks and then fly these planes into the building.
The next theory that I want to visit is the holographic plane, that they weren't real, or they were projections in the sky for all of Manhattan to see. Let's talk about that for a second. As strange as that is to put on the table, when this theory, which is still alive out there, what do you think about that possibility?
Well, it's an interesting theory. I mean, it obviously appeals to the folks who weren't physically, from a discernment and epistemological perspective, when you're not actually at an event to witness something, all you can go off of whatever evidence you have available. And a lot of the evidence we have to say that the event even happened is video footage for most people. So I think it's a compelling theory for a lot of people because, they weren't physically there. But in my estimation, I would say that I'm not inclined I don't put a lot of faith into that theory because we have reports of actual witnesses on the scene who saw the building crash into it, who heard the explosions, who saw debris, things like this. So in order for that holographic plane theory to be valid, we'd have to figure out a way to explain all the firsthand witness testimony, the cell phone footage, things like this, or camera footage. There weren't many cell phones back then, but camera footage of the event. So I think that one's probably unlikely. But what's your take on it?
Well, when we start to jump into this part of it, I think there was an awful lot of video that is pretty compelling. And then when you go and there is a very famous video that I've watched over and over again, showing a wing disappear behind this building, right? And yeah, you've seen it. So I went and pulled up all of the historic images of the World Trade Center, and I looked at and all the streets and everything. You know, I plotted everything out, and I found that building, and the building was not behind the World Trade Center. There's a section of it where it kind of looks like it's off in the distance, and then, of course, then how could the wing disappear? Well, I went and looked myself, and that building is indeed in the foreground, and that stopped it in its tracks for me. But yet, there are those out there that want to say that, you know, all of this video was manipulated and it was CGI, and it's CGI artifacts in the film and in the video. But that part of it kind of, kills that part of these conspiracy theories. I'm not here to debunk. I'm trying to figure this out just like everybody else. And if you're going to say that this video definitively says this, when clearly that building is not in the background, it is in the foreground, then it ruins other ideas that may be put out there, because you are suggesting something that isn't real, and it kills the other theories that we're able to get out there and put on the table.
Well, exactly. I mean, when you think about the science of evaluating a theory, a theory is basically a story. It's an explanation. So you got all these phenomena happening, so you need an explanation to explain how all these phenomena work together. And as soon as there's a discrepancy, then, you have to re-examine the theory. And, that particular video, I actually remember seeing that video footage. That was one when I was looking through that aspect of the explanation. Is this a series of holographic projections or doctored footage? I remember seeing that video. I'm like, well, that looks pretty convincing. And then I happened to see a second follow-up video of a guy doing exactly what you said, who had a better take and understanding of where these buildings were actually placed. And you realize that the theory itself was based on a fallacious point, which is that this building was in the foreground when it was actually in the background. So, when we consider these theories, it's not that we're trying to railroad all of them except for our pet theory. We're more so just throwing out ideas, throwing out possibilities, and discussing how likely one is versus another. It doesn't mean we're in a black and white mode of thinking. We're trying to say one is definitely right and all the rest are wrong.
Well, and then we have the other part when we talk about these planes or holograms or, holographic projections. The explosion, let's say it, well, then how did the shape of the plane form on the building as it exploded? That's the part where I'm a little bit confused here. The debris is there. The parts are falling onto the street. People are watching the explosion. If the plane wasn't real, then how was the explosion caused with the outline of the plane clearly on the outside of the building?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, if you add up all of the evidence that's available, the video footage, the debris, the hole in the side of the building, the sound of the building, or the plane hitting the building, then it really starts to call into question that these are holographic projections, unless they had speakers that were perfectly calibrated and tuned so that when this projection hit the building, the sound emitted from that place as if it had actually been a genuine explosion. But, I mean, this is really difficult stuff to pull off. So it's certainly possible, but I think given all the other available evidence, this one is less likely of a possibility, I would say.
Now, moving on, as we talk about knowing this in advance and having this being a huge conspiracy where there are a lot of people involved inside and outside of the United States, and the media being involved, is the question of news reports and the timing of them going down on TV versus what people were actually seeing outside in real time. For example, the actor Dan Fogler, who was a guest on this show, star of Don Peyote and of the ping pong movie too as well. I'll think of the name of that here in just a second. But he was here, and he's really into conspiracy theory and all of this. And it was started, and this was what he said on this program, was started on September 11th, 2001, because he was in his apartment in New York. 9/11 is going down. He can see the World Trade Centers outside. And then he hears a reporter say on TV that one of the buildings just fell down. And he walks out, and he's looking, and the buildings are still there.
Wow.
So that for him was the start of his travel down this road, because he knew what he was hearing on TV versus what he was seeing with his own eyes were two different things. He still doesn't understand how that happened, but he is convinced that he was told on TV that one of the World Trade Centers just fell. So he went out to look out his window to see it, and the building was still there.
Right. So how do you explain that? And, obviously in a situation like that, the media is tipped off. They know what's going to happen. They know that the buildings are going to collapse. I mean, I'm sure another example that goes in tandem with the one you just mentioned, and I hadn't heard of that one, is I'm sure everybody remembers the footage of the BBC reporter saying that World Trade Center 7 had just collapsed, but in the background is the World Trade Center building uncollapsed. It's still standing. So that's another glaring example of the media somehow knowing before the rest of us, before these events even happen, before these buildings even collapse, that these buildings are going to collapse. So what's going on there?
And I'm watching Twitter right now because everybody is talking about that and the BBC and the video, which I have the link here. I don't know if I can actually play it on the show without, being shut down. But I'm going to check it out during the break, and maybe we'll play the audio from it. But everybody is aware of that BBC footage. Why is it, Justin, that more isn't made of that today? How is the media allowed to escape and the BBC, and certainly Washington, when this is an obvious point that is caught on tape?
Well, I mean, in order to answer that question, we'd have to think about how people come to know what they believe. And because of the destruction of critical thinking and people really understanding their beliefs, we have this kind of mass mind control, social indoctrination program. So most people believe things. I actually, just a friend of mine read a book about persuasion, and he said that if 7 people tell you the same fact and these 7 people don't seem to be connected to each other, then subconsciously it's highly likely you will start to believe whatever fact that is as being true. So we have a situation where most people don't really know why they believe things to be true, especially when it comes from the news. How many people fact check news stories? Probably not that many. So it's a situation, I would say, where the vast majority of the population believes something is true, then because a lot of other people believe it, then they just buy into it, and then nobody ever fact checks. Nobody asks questions. Because, the other aspects of it, too, is that you start asking questions, now you start to label yourself as an outsider, and nobody wants to be cast out of whatever their social group is. So there's a big sociological and psychological component to that, I feel like.
We're going to head towards a break right here. But the foreknowledge part of 9/11 is well documented. We're going to visit that when we come back. We have the oil and petroleum issue that is right there in front of us. We have the fact that the buildings fell down the way that they did without really any explanation of that and the engineering behind it that would allow this type of collapse. We have that. We have the passport. We have bin Laden's family being flown out of the country. We have a long list of things here that are right out there in front of us. But yet, I don't think there is anybody in the mainstream that is brave enough to step up and question this. We need shows like this to keep the story alive. Why is that, Justin? Why won't a brave mainstream journalist step up and ask the questions that need to be asked?
Well, I'm certainly glad that you're asking him, and praise be that we have an outlet like this where we can have these frank and open discussions, because it's essential. I mean, I would say that we're living in a time where the media is not really here to report the facts or engage us in meaningful discussion about what's happening in our reality. I mean, I think that's an obvious point to most people who are awake, is that the media is here to control our reality. It's an augmented or manipulated form of reality, a manipulated narrative. And, to go against that, to question that, it means to be excommunicated. I mean, look at Ben Swan. The guy started reporting on a whole bunch of things. He got censored. There's various other reporters who've kind of stepped out of line, and they end up getting censored. So these guys have a death grip on the media, and it's incredibly important that they have that, because everybody's basis for behaving in the world is all dependent on what they think is real. So if you can control a person's sense of reality, then you can basically control a person, and that's why the media is so important to maintain control of.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the Pentagon. And again, one of the strangest, when we look at everything that has been presented to us, what we are supposed to accept as true, and we look at all of the other evidence around it, it is a tough one to swallow and digest. I can't. I find it difficult. I really do. We're going to discuss that when we come back. Our guest tonight, Justin Deschamps. This show is dedicated to Jim Mars. It's Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires. This year we've experienced more than our fair share. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and last month I decided to make sure my family does not have to worry about food should we get caught in a real emergency situation. Introducing Numana, a healthy, storable product that tastes so good that you'll want to eat it every day instead of just during those times of duress. All Numana products have a 25-year shelf life, are MSG and GMO-free, no preservatives, and are made in America. With the Numana pack in your home, you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you've protected your family. Not only have I tasted and tested, I own it. Now you can too. Just click on the Numana banner on JimmyChurchRadio.com and use the promo code Jimmy when you order. In addition to a discount, we'll send you an autographed Fade to Black t-shirt. Seriously. Go Beckley Teppy. Do you want to be an official Fadernaut? Of course you do. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Just go to our membership section at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
If you have hard water, the lime scale not only leaves white spots, it clogs pipes and breaks down appliances, costing you hundreds of dollars in energy and wear. Eliminate lime scale and other water issues like brown staining and bad odors with HydroCare water products available from Wave Home Solutions. Wave's affordable water systems don't use salts or chemicals. You'll love the way your water tastes, smells, and looks. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Justin Deschamps, Stillness in the Storm. Amazing website. Go and check it out. The links are up at jimmychurchradio.com. Today is September 11th, and we are discussing every angle of what happened on that day in 2001. And I have the video up here, Justin, of the BBC. And I'm gonna play it. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I haven't seen this in advance, but let's check this out.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. It seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope.
So I can't see. What do you think?
It's standing behind her. Now, this is what...
That has hit them very, very hard.
Jane, I think many of us, when we heard the news, perhaps on the radio earlier today, were completely flabbergasted by it.
Okay, so I'm going to stop this right here. The reporter, she steps away to show where the north and south towers were behind her, right? She steps away, and there is WTC-7. WTC-7 is clearly standing right there as they're talking about this. Now, without breaking this down and how this possibly could be maybe debunked, or how I'm not so sure by looking at this video that it can be debunked. They just reported that the building had fallen. They cut to a live report with her, and she backs away to show the background, and there it is. WTC-7 is clearly standing right there. Now, is this evidence of what they were told to report in advance, and that the building was going to come down and they just messed up and reported too soon?
I think that's probably a glaring example. I mean, we know already that, the same type of narratives and scripts are handed out to local media outlets. So there's a bunch of videos out there about that, people just literally reading off the scripts. So what probably happened is they got tipped off that the building had collapsed, and it was just, once the copy was in the press people's hands, it just moved through the paces and ended up in front of the talking heads. So, but I mean, it would be really hard to debunk something like that, because the woman in the field is standing right in front of the tower, World Trade Center 7. The guy in the studio is saying, hey, this building was collapsed, but you're seeing it right in front of her, that it's obviously there. So how one could debunk this, I mean, you'd have to go through a lot of mental hoops to do it, but it's one of those glaring examples, I feel like.
Now, let's move over to the Pentagon, and I have a lot of issues here too as well. Now, the first thing that I find it hard to understand is how an amateur pilot could control a commercial jetliner and fly it that low and manage to pull that off and hit the building. It's one thing to discuss hitting one of the World Trade Centers, but those are up in the air, 100 stories in the air. It's a big target. Here, you need to fly into a city and bring the plane down to ground level and get it to hit the side of the Pentagon. That, we're going to discuss other aspects of it, but that must be difficult even for the best, most professional pilot to pull off.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, and the missile, if you look at the trajectory, the thing was literally like 10 or 20 feet off of the ground. I think it hit like the second floor of the building, the second story of the building. So how somebody managed to turn around, perfectly line up along the target, come through and land, hover over the ground. And then on top of that, there's telephone poles, there's light poles, there's all these other objects, obstacles in the way. How they managed to cut through all that perfectly and then smash into the side of the Pentagon and leave no debris whatsoever. The plane just like atomized when it hit the building. I mean, how does that happen?
The Pentagon and Washington, D.C. has to be one of the most videotaped and security cameraed places on Earth.
Yep.
Okay. Why hasn't anybody come forward with videotape? Now, I understand suppressing and the government going around and not releasing their video, but there must be video in private hands. Nothing has surfaced.
Nothing. Yeah, they even commandeered. I think there was a Holiday Inn or DoubleTree or something like that across the street, and they released some of their footage, which I think has survived in a few obscure places online somewhere. But that was quickly confiscated by the FBI. So yeah, all of the footage that was from that event was completely scrubbed from the public record.
How is it? Well, obviously it happened, but is it possible that there is no footage of it? That's the first question. And the second thing is there no plane that hit the Pentagon? That's the other aspect of it. You know, I know that there is talks of a missile. Now, if it was a missile, that would explain nobody seeing a plane and no video of a plane. Okay, all right. So I know we're getting out there, but if it was a missile, now we are talking about a very, very heavy conspiracy and a real false flag, one that raises big concerns for this country.
Certainly. Well, in line with that, I happened to find a quote from a Major General Albert Stubblebean, and he says, I quote, "I saw a missile hitting the Pentagon, not a plane. All of the sensors were turned off that day. One apparently did not turn off, and it shows this object hit the Pentagon, and it did not look like an airplane." So here we have a general, a major general, coming forward to say that there was definitely not an airplane, it was a missile. So that, although we might not have footage, we do have testimony like this that adds a lot of credibility to the notion that there wasn't actually a plane at all, it was a missile.
Yeah, he goes on to say at each floor, successive puffs of smoke are seen all the way down. Those puffs of smoke are due to controlled demolitions. The collapse of the Twin Towers were caused by controlled demolition. Major General Albert Stubblebean.
Exactly. So, I mean, there are people who have come out and dropped testimony out there that raises a lot of questions. And, you know, again, I forget the video I saw, I wish I could remember it, but somebody had done a reconstruction of the attack on the Pentagon, and they placed all of the telephone poles, the cameras, the fencing, all of that. And all of these things, the plane would have had to just move through as if it wasn't even a physical object, like it was a ghost, and then somehow materialize right before it hits the side of the building, because these telephone poles and these light poles would have banged up the wings. That, you know, obviously something like a plane hit going that fast, hitting a telephone pole, it'd throw it off its trajectory, things like this. So there's a glaring amount of, I would say, circumstantial evidence to suggest that there's definitely not an airplane there, and there was something else going on.
I have another issue and this is just me. Before I go and say this was a missile, this was a false flag, this was planned, let's just say for a moment that it was what it was. It was a hijacker. He grabbed control of the plane. He flew it. He managed to fly it into the Pentagon. If we go with that, and I'm looking at the size of the plane, where it would I couldn't see anywhere, and I've looked at lots of photographs, and if I'm wrong, and if somebody has got something else I need to see, fine, send it to me, and I'll stand corrected. But there's no marks in the grass. There isn't a long track mark. It seems like the plane engines would have dragged on the grass for hundreds of yards, and we would have seen evidence of that. And that everything that I have seen of the Pentagon, there isn't anything there. I'm just asking for something to clear my mind on this. That's all, and I'm cool. I can move forward. But there isn't a long gouge in front of the Pentagon where this plane, you know, and the reason why I bring this up, it seems to me that the plane would have not been steady, in that it would have hit the ground, come up, hit the ground, gouged, left a mark, and then hit the Pentagon, instead of a nice smooth arc straight in by a professional pilot. Right? You understand what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, anybody who's flown in an airplane, you know, at least a handful of times, knows that the moment before the plane touches the ground, they're basically like in free fall. They're trying to keep that thing hovering off of the ground, and then when they hit the ground, the plane's jostling around and it's correcting itself and it's trying to stay in a straight line. So, you know, this isn't an exact science when it comes to getting a plane that close to the ground. You know, it would take a lot of discipline. It would take a tremendous amount of skill and effort for somebody to pull something like that off. And professional pilots have come out and said that they couldn't even do something like this.
I'm looking at Jim K just sent me a video. It's up on Twitter. You can look at it here, of something hitting the side of the Pentagon. And this is pretty interesting. I would like to see this original link if this was posted by UFO Tweets. Peter, where's the original link to this? I would like to see this on a big screen. I can't enlarge this here, but that's interesting. So please send me the original link to that, and we can we can check that out. The point that you brought up earlier, Justin, which is all of the telephone poles, right? And everything else that was in its way, wasn't it all knocked down? Isn't there evidence of this plane coming in? I'm talking about the wingspan. And this is a point that is as elemental as it sounds. It's like an obvious question that everybody has about the Pentagon. We should see a debris field out in front of the Pentagon and lots of damage before the plane struck the side. I don't want to take away from all of the tragic deaths and the things that happened at the Pentagon and throughout the United States that day, but these are questions that even the most basic of minds are asking. What about that? Have you seen any evidence of telephone poles and things that had to have been knocked down in front of the Pentagon?
Well, that's the thing, is they scrubbed all the footage. It was something where nobody could go in and perform their own independent investigation. So all of the material, I think this, from what I remember correctly, after this thing hit the Pentagon, they went in there with bulldozers. They ripped up all the grass. They tore everything out. Nobody could get in there and look for any type of debris whatsoever. And it's the Pentagon, so it's a secure facility. So as far as I can tell, there's no evidence of anything. I mean, all we have to work with is the fact that, you know, there was reconstruction on the Pentagon, that we have reports that the Pentagon was hit. But as far as like direct evidence that we can look to after the fact, it's all been scrubbed. It's all been removed. And it's the good reason to do that, is because then it prevents people from conducting their own investigation and fact-checking. They certainly don't want to do that if there's some alternative story than the mainstream narrative being pushed to the people.
Here is a fact. This is from Mark, Toronto, over in Australia. He says, fact, the plane can't fly at the reported speed at that level because the wings generate too much lift.
Great point. That is a great point. Of course, that would make a lot of sense.
He also says the plane allegedly flew through 5 light poles.
There you go. Yeah.
Now, there's just now. Okay, this is one of the points that it's so obvious, but the total story, the clear story, the one that explains everything, has never been presented to us. The one where everything is out. This is what happened. Here are the videos. Here's this. Here's the time. Here's this. Here's the radar cross section. Here it is flying across Washington D.C. Here it is in Manhattan. The Flight 93. We haven't even addressed that point yet, and we'll get to that after the break. But that's the part for all of us. The reason why all of these questions are still out there is because the clear story has never been presented to us with everything that we need to know.
Exactly. And that's a glaring problem. I mean, to take a really hard-lined approach to this, you know, how do we know if an explanation is good? How do we know if it actually is valid? Well, from a scientific perspective, you know, when you're developing a scientific theory, your theory has to explain all of the observed phenomena. And it has to do it well, and it has to do it in conjunction with other established knowledge. So if there's even one point, no matter how small, no matter how seemingly unimportant, that isn't properly explained in a theory or an explanation, then you have to call the whole theory into question and do an evaluation. So here we have a situation where there's just piles and piles of evidence and observations that contradict the mainstream official narrative. And so it's incumbent upon all of us who actually want to seek the truth to recognize these things and ask these hardline questions. And that's why this issue, this 9/11 issue, isn't going away, and it's just gaining more momentum as time goes on.
This email was just sent in from Bernadette. She says, Jimmy, you were discussing factual evidence for the 9/11 conspiracy. A big one I'd like to hear you discuss with Justin is the financial stock puts that had money invested against the airliner. How did all top 20 corporations have money invested on the tragedy of the specific airliner and capitalize on the 9/11 tragedy financially? And that's another, I read so much about that. You brought up the insurance aspect, but there was the other part of this where the stock market had investment and puts against the airliner. Now, wait a minute here. And nobody wants to ask questions about this. What did you find out about that?
Oh, well, follow the money. I mean, I saw a documentary, I believe it was called The Ring of Power. It's like a 5-hour documentary, and the woman who put it together did a painstaking job at detailing all the financial connections. And one of them, she said, was what you just mentioned, which is that certain players in the stock market seem to know in advance where to place their money so that after this event happened, they would not only protect their assets, but make a boatload of money in the process.
And some of these financial moves in the stock market were done 1 to 2 weeks or more in advance and specifically targeting that day.
Right, exactly. And that's the way these guys work. I mean, the financial system is rigged, of course, but it's not completely and utterly rigged. I would say that it's more allowed to unfold in a certain way. And what they've really gotten good at is manipulating world events and using prediction software and various other algorithms to understand the fluctuations of the market. And obviously, if they've been planning this event for years, which by all accounts they have, then they're going to put all their money at certain places to make the most amount of money possible. And, you know, there's a glaring example. This isn't conspiracy theory stuff. You can go look up these records yourself, and you can see them for yourself.
The hole that was left in the side of the Pentagon, you look at that, and then you think about the size of the jetliner. Two things come into play. First one is you just go, well, obviously a plane didn't do that. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But the second thing where I have to just back up and think about the strength of the Pentagon, the marble, the concrete, it's the Pentagon, right? It's the center of our military. That, of course, the building is going to be built to another standard. And that the hole that was left was the hole that was left because the force of the plane and the size of the plane and the aluminum and everything else was not strong enough to generate a larger hole. So I'm left with that conundrum. What do you think ultimately crashed into the Pentagon?
Well, we have no debris to speak of. We have these obstructions that would prevent an airplane from flying that low to the ground. We have the point that somebody sent you, which was a really good point, that at the speed at which the plane would have had to hit to produce that type of a crater would have been so large that the lift on the wing would have pulled it off the ground. So I would say that we're probably looking at some type of ballistic missile, especially if we consider the testimony of General Doublebeam. So it seems as though we're dealing with some type of missile. I would say that a missile attack would incorporate all of the observations we have into a cohesive explanation. That's where I'm putting my money at this point.
The side of the building, this is from the very beginning with the Pentagon, this is the one thing that stood out for me, is you have the wingspan and you have the hole in the middle, but there's nothing that is on the outside, right? There's nothing there. There's no broken windows. There's no scratches on the side of the bed. There's nothing really there. So I said to myself, well, the wings fell off. Okay, all right, okay, the wings fell off. They're out there somewhere, but they weren't, right?
Well, sure. I mean, and the other thing to consider, too, is, that this plane allegedly had massive engines on it. Where do these, this plane smashes into the building, these engines got to go somewhere. You'd think there'd be minor craters or some type of damage to the facing to show that these two engines smashed in, and they would have been fairly close in the distance from the center points of the initial impact, right? So we would expect to see that stuff there in the building, but if you actually pull up a photo, which I'm looking at right now, there's two dark spots, but they're not equidistant from the center point, which means that they probably weren't the engines. There was something else that had smashed in there. So where did these engines go?
Yeah, I mean, there is with the World Trade Centers, and full tanks and crashing to the top of the building, the possibility of a lot of it being burnt up, and then the buildings just collapsed, the planes disintegrated along with everything else. Obviously, the buildings fell and everything was pulverized into dust. I can understand that. With the Pentagon, we had the exact opposite of that. No building collapsed. There should have been debris everywhere, tripping over debris. The tail of the airplane should have been somewhere, and those engines that you're talking about. And that's where, with the Pentagon, I'm very perplexed with that. And then we're going to take a break. In rural Pennsylvania, Flight 93 nosedives into the ground, and nothing is left behind. I mean, nothing is left, and there wasn't an opportunity afforded to any independent investigation or film crews or anything else that were allowed to the crash site to go and ask questions. And that is another giant red flag for us, I think.
Oh, yeah, unquestionably. I mean, we can certainly dive into it a little bit here, but yeah, I'm looking at a photo right now of the crash, and I don't see anything. I don't see a fuselage. I don't see seats. I don't see, airplane, the wings. I don't see any engines. I don't see anything. It's just a black spot on the ground. So where did this plane go?
Yeah, the evidence that we have over the years of plane crashes all around this planet, we are able to go back, collect the debris, and figure out how the plane crashed. Right? That's what we do. And with Flight 93, the exact opposite of that came into play here. There is nothing left behind. There's nothing here. The plane crashed at 500 miles an hour, nosedived in. There's nothing left. And that is a little bit strange to me. It doesn't sit right.
Right, and they have these black boxes. I mean, the black boxes are designed to withstand massive impacts so you can have flight recorder data. But where did that go? As far as I remember, there was no black box.
We need to take a break right here. When we come back, we need to ask the question, why? Why? Okay? Big conspiracy, false flags. Well, we have to ask the question why. We're going to do all of that when we come back. Our guest, Justin Deschamps. It's Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station. Salt Lake City, Utah. Van Buren, Arkansas.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up, standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you, whether it's from a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRARadio.com.
Does your basement or crawl space have a damp, musty smell? Well, watch out. That's a sign of too much moisture and not enough ventilation. And that can mean increased mold growth and the buildup of harmful toxins and gases. Don't bother with a dehumidifier. It just circulates the same unhealthy air. Now there's a better way to remove these dangers and odors. It's with the computerized Wave Moisture Control Unit that reduces moisture and expels pollutants.
We replaced our old dehumidifier with the Wave unit, and in only 3 weeks, our basement is dry and the musty smell is gone.
Wave units require no maintenance, no buckets of water or filters, and costs only pennies a day to run. Breathe better, live healthier with an affordable, no-maintenance Wave unit. Call 888-717-WAVE, 888-717-WAVE, or visit dryhealthyhome.com. dryhealthyhome.com.
Ride the wave. Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I only drink Fade to Black blend coffee from River Moon. Just click on the River Moon coffee banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code F2B Blend.
So are you tired of being tired? Well, then it's time to get the tea. Hey, it's Lisa here to tell you about this all-natural, all-organic tea I've been drinking that has had great results for over 20 years. It's called Life Change Tea, and it's specially formulated to help detoxify and cleanse your kidneys, liver, colon, and blood all at once. The colon is one of the most ignored organs in the human body. The faster that waste is eliminated from the body, the less time that waste sits in our intestines, spreading toxins to our bloodstream. This tea helps cleanse chemicals caused by outside intruders from our entire digestive system. And get this, weight loss can be a side effect. And with continued use of the tea, you can experience clearer, healthier, younger looking skin, increased energy, and a happier outlook on life. So if you're tired of being tired, get the Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. And like me, you'll be glad you did.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony. Damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. September 11th, 9/11. Our guest tonight, Justin Deschamps, dedicating this show to Jim Mars. And now I'm going to read something really quick to you, Justin, about this insider trading. This is from Alan M. Pachesman from the Journal of Business. And he says, a measure of abnormal long put volume was also examined and seemed to be abnormally high levels in the days leading up to the attacks. Consequently, the paper concludes that there is evidence of unusual option market activity in the days leading up to September 11th that is consistent with investors trading on advanced knowledge of the attacks. Okay? The study was intended to address the great deal of speculation about whether option market activity indicated that the terrorists or their associates had traded in the days leading up to September 11th on advanced knowledge of the impending attacks. In the days leading up to 9/11, analysis shows a rise in the put-to-call ratio for United Airlines and American Airlines, the two airlines from which the planes were hijacked on 9/11. Between September 6th and 7th, the Chicago Board Options Exchange recorded purchases of 4,744 put option contracts on United Airlines, 396 and 396 call options. On September 10th, more trading in Chicago saw the purchase of 4,516 put options in American Airlines, the other airline involved in the hijackings, with a mere 748 call options in American purchased that day. No other airline companies had unusual put-to-call ratio in the days leading up to the attacks. The 9/11 Commission concluded that these abnormal patterns in trading were coincidental. Now, there's a lot more information that is out there, including Raytheon, and what had happened there. TD Waterhouse, brokerage firms NFS, Fidelity Investments, they estimated that the insider or that the trading or traders would have realized a $5 million profit. Now, I'm just, when you look at all of this, it just seems to me that there was foreknowledge. There was a lot of information out there. It wasn't just with Washington, but others came into play here. The question is, Justin, why? Why would they do it? Is it money?
Well, I think the answer to that question is multiple layered. I mean, for certain players in the cabal criminal network, you could say money is a motivating factor. So I would say they recruit certain people through greed, and a lot of people are just happy making gobs of money and living opulent lives, and they're not necessarily read in or aware of the deeper, darker aspects. But I think as far as I went really deep in trying to answer this question. I'm still trying to answer this question, but what I've distilled from my research is this, and it's basically that the powers that be, we're dealing with a dark occult group. By all accounts, they call themselves the Order of the Black Sun. They reach back thousands of years, and they use various recruiting arms to carry out their agenda. Now, these people believe, and you've had other people on the show talk about this, they believe that the universe is basically hell, and that instead of serving in heaven, they want to reign in hell. They want to be the masters of the prison, so to speak. So one of the ways that they do that is they, for lack of a better term, they give the finger to the divine. Any way that they can use to make the world corrupt, horrible, evil, destructive, manipulative, they want to push that. And as a basis for that, I want to talk to you a little bit about a group that came out. They actually started in the 1666. So let me just give you a moment to run through that.
Sure.
I think it'll help explain a lot of this. So back in 1665, there was a man named Shabbatzi Tesby who proclaimed, he was a Jewish rabbi who proclaimed himself the Messiah. Now, he appears to be an operative, a crypto Jew, if you will, working for the Order of the Black Sun. And what his job was to convert massive amounts of Judaism over into basically a hedonistic cult. And one of the tenets of this cult was that they believed in Judaism that the Messiah would come in times of great sin or great virtue. And since people can't be saints, since we all can't be saints, then let us be sinners. So in other words, their belief was that if they created as much sin and debauchery and inequity as possible on the planet Earth, then eventually the Messiah would come and, there would be a golden age. So these guys literally believe that causing the most pain and hardships as humanly possible is the best way to realize their agenda. And I think that helps explain a lot of the machinations that we see here. I mean, why would these people plan an event like this? Why would we see all sorts of things that we have? I mean, cures for cancer being suppressed, horrific pain and tragedy all upon the planet. I think it's partially because this deranged and insane group of dark occultists is trying to create as much pain and suffering on the planet as possible. And that's partially to realize their vision of a dark world. And we could certainly dig more into that, but I think that's a huge thread that explains part of the why question.
Is the other the other part of this, which is the backside of 9/11, which is the invasion of Afghanistan, 1. 2, Iraq came into play. Terrorist and Saddam Hussein was somehow connected to bin Laden, which a lot of this, turned out to be completely false, and weapons of mass destruction, and the dots are all connected here. But is there also the aspect of, which comes into play with what you're explaining here, of course, that there are dark powers in play, and that they wanted this false flag created to go in and invade these countries and profit off of those invasions, not only directly with the military and Raytheon and Tomahawk missiles and bombs and bullets and everything that the logistics that comes into play and the profiting off of that type of invasion, but certainly the reconstructive aspect of it afterwards, right? We'll go and level the countries, and then we'll go in and use American companies to go in and build streets and infrastructure and water and power plants and of course tap into the oil, and we'll capture that too as well. That all of this was part of what 9/11 was about.
Yeah, precisely. You nailed it. I mean, multi-tiered, multi-pronged agenda and platform. They wanted to produce a platform for basically American imperialism. We're going to become the world police. We're going to go in and save these countries from whatever tyrants they happen to be operating under. We're going to give them democracy, and everything's going to be great. Well, what goes hand in hand with that? Well, we have massive increases in military spending. So we got the military imperialism that goes there. We're usually invading countries that have a lot of financial resources and assets. I mean, Iraq has a ton of oil wells. It's one of the most oil-rich places on the planet. You look at Afghanistan. Afghanistan has a massive amount of opium production, which is obviously important because the drug companies need to have access to opium. So, yeah, I mean, just from a financial perspective, if you don't want to dive too deep in the occult stuff, just from a financial perspective, there was a huge incentive for this event to take place, this false flag to take place, so that they could drum up a lot of material support and a lot of money. And I would say, to throw in the ufology aspect to that, well, why would they need all this money in the first place? I mean, think about it. We're dealing with the Rothschilds, we're dealing with the Rockefellers, the people who own the Federal Reserve. These guys are receiving trillions of dollars every year from taxes and the central banking schemes that they have. So why would they need all this money? Well, I think part of the reason they needed this money was because they needed to fund black operations and various programs. So this is probably a money grab for that type of agenda as well.
The back room, the dark boardrooms where these corrupt minds sit around and actually discuss what we are talking about here. It's one of the most frightening aspects of all of this, because it does go on. I guarantee that it does go on. The question about bin Laden's plane, which for me was one of the big tipping points in the very, very, very beginning for me. It was bin Laden's plane, the family and planes, and the passport. Now, this email just came in from Rob, and he says, how is it that we know bin Laden's family was on a private plane leaving the country during the no-fly? This would seem easy to hide if desired. It seems to me we only know of this because we are supposed to know about it. And that is exactly the point. He right. brings up one of the best. I mean, it was like out of the gate, bin Laden and the family right there. And look, bin Laden may have planned all of this. And yes, he may have been given all of this in advance. And yes, he had his direct connections to the CIA and what was going on in Afghanistan during the Russian occupation. We understand all of that. Bin Laden was a player, and he was known to us from the get-go, right? And let's not forget that Bill Cooper brought up all of this way before it had ever happened. So it wasn't like bin Laden was unknown. But the fact that his family's planes were flown out of this country and we were told about it, it would have been an easy thing to hide. A very easy thing to hide, but they didn't. It just shows a conspiracy on all levels.
Yeah, that's a good question to ask. Is it something that they wanted to drop out there to try to, as a red herring, to lead people astray, to say, hey, well, you know, bin Laden's family was secreted away out of the country. Does that suggest that he was complicit? Does that suggest that there was players and actors in the U.S. government that were complicit in this? And if that's the case, if they're trying to leak that out, then why would they do that? Well, it suggests that if it is a red herring, that there is some type of deeper agenda that they're trying to mask by creating a layers of obfuscation. And, you know, that's what these guys like to do. Usually the lie is not just one lie, and then you peel back that layer and all of a sudden you see the truth. Usually it's deception over deception over deception. And I would say that's the case because within these schemes, you know, we tend to think that the cabal or the powers that be are like this perfectly coordinated system and everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what's up. Well, I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's actually the case is you have multiple groups all vying for power, and a certain centralized group uses various methods of manipulation to coerce others. So what this could be is maybe they bribed bin Laden. Maybe they had some deal between bin Laden and the Bushes. They secreted him away, but he was one layer of the onion, and there was deeper layers at work here. Who knows?
This email just came in. I need information from everybody in this audience on this, including you, Justin. This is from Eric, and he says, anybody else see something on CNN that awful day that ran across the news ticker at the bottom of the TV? It said something about, and I'm quoting here, the public shouldn't panic, end quote. That if there were serious attacks against the government, there was a shadow government ready to step in and take over in case of any federal national emergency. Do you remember anything like that, Justin? And I'm throwing this out to the audience as well.
I don't recall seeing something like that, but it sounds quite interesting for sure.
I do want to take the chance to open up the phone lines. They have been going off. I've been ignoring them. Sure. But I'm only going to take calls on 323-275-9695 or 818-921-6929. Again, 323-275-9695 or 818-921-6929. 6929. I needed to get that out of the way. The phones are going crazy, but I need everything to go over to those phone lines, and then I'll start to pay attention. Justin, today, I do want to take this opportunity to talk about, this is 17 years ago. And we have a lot of who was seated in government and the military still in place today. Today, we have QAnon. What is there a connection? Is there a connection with QAnon's information today? And could QAnon have been part of what was going down in 2001?
That's a really good question. I think that, you know, there's a correlation there. Yet, like you said, it's a 17-year anniversary. The 17th letter of the alphabet is Q. And what that means, I'm not quite sure. But it seems.
Okay, you're breaking up. Everything that you just said needs to be repeated. You said this is the yeah, that's okay. Let's pick it up from there. You said this is the 17th anniversary of 2001.
Yeah, the 17th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. So that's 17. The number 17 corresponds to the letter Q in the alphabet from a gematria perspective. So there's that connection. What that means necessarily, I'm not quite sure, but I find it interesting that, like we were saying earlier, the original September 11th attack occurred on Tuesday. Tuesday is the god of war. So it was the cabal essentially attacking some aspect of our society. We'll just leave it at that. So here we are 17 years later. Now it's also falling on a Tuesday, because today's Tuesday. And we have this Q thing that came out last year. So it seems to imply that perhaps and this is a big question. I'm not saying this is what I believe, but I'm just throwing it out there for some of us to consider. What if the whole alliance that has been trying to free the planet has been around for a long time? Some people say that this plan's been being hashed for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. What if the 9/11 event was allowed to happen from the alliance perspective so that it would eventually culminate in a massive freedom event? I mean, that's a big pill to swallow, but I think it's a definitive possibility. And if Q, I mean, that's a whole conversation right there, but if Q is really representative of an alliance faction within the government, then what could be planned for the days following today? That's my question. That's what I'm not sure is happening. Is there really an alliance faction that's out there to free us? It certainly seems like it depends based on where you look, but there's a lot of uncertainty there.
When we have the big question here, how could our government plan something like this? 3,000 people died, more died of cancer and lingering effects of what happened in Manhattan that day. So there's that part of it. And it seems too much to absorb. But I have to direct everybody back very simply to Operation Northwoods. And Operation Northwoods, which goes back to 1962, was a proposal that called for the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and other government operatives to commit acts of terrorism against American civilians and military targets, and blaming it on the Cuban government. And the plans detailed very specifically about hijacking planes, blowing up a U.S. ship, and orchestrating violent terrorism in U.S. cities, and use this as an excuse to turn around and attack Fidel Castro and Cuba. Now, this was used to create public support for that war against Cuba, blaming it on them. Hijacking a plane and using that plane, shooting the plane down and saying that Cuba shot the plane down, right? And now it's like, wait a minute here. Now, this plan was drafted by the Joint Chiefs, signed by Chairman Lyman Lemonster, and sent to the Secretary of Defense. And it was sat down, proposed to not only the Joint Chiefs, but President John F. Kennedy. Now, it was rejected, allegedly, by Kennedy, but the very tops, the Joint Chiefs, the CIA, drafted this plan and thought it was a great idea. Had Kennedy said yes, it would have happened. Right. Exactly. So, yeah, here we have a glaring example right in the public eye where the government is planning false flag style attacks to use against another nation, but still, they're capable of doing this. They're capable of thinking about these things. They're capable of even implementing these plans. And, I mean, the history of false flag, it goes back years. So that is a really good example of what I would say is a proof of character when it comes to the government, the shadow government in particular, the deep state, and what lengths they're willing to go through in order to create catalyzing events. And then the other good point that we didn't mention that I think we should throw out there now is the Citigroup memo, I believe. There was a Citigroup memo that came out saying that they were going to have some type of catalyzing event that will allow them to gain control over some aspects of the market. So that's another glaring indication that these things do happen. Mass manipulation is nothing new and has been going on for a very long time. And the other part of this is that this proposal was presented in a document called The Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba. You can go and read that yourself, and it was released back in 1997. The document is real. But the other part for me is, how long did Operation Northwoods and the idea behind it, the logistics behind it, just sit around and get discussed many times and proposed and maybe even implemented. That's the thing, right? The whole outline of what happened on September 11th is right here in this proposal by the CIA and the Joint Chiefs. It's right there, the groundwork of it, and to get the swell of American emotion and the population behind anything else that they may do, including me. I was outraged, right, at the things that I thought about 9/11 that day and the days after that. I was ready to do anything, and so was the rest of the country. And Operation Northwoods, in its core, was definitely put into play.
Exactly. I mean, you're basically reading out of the playbook of the cabal. You know, that these manipulations, these things that happen, are nothing new. And to speak to that a little bit, one thing that I always like to try to highlight when we're talking about false flag attacks is you got to remember who the target is. The target of the false flag is not the people at the World Trade Center. It's not the government. It's not the airlines. It's not the terrorists. The target of the false flag is you. It's your consciousness. It's your mind. It's your sense of reality. So unlike what we normally think of when we see these events, you got to think a good analogy is like being in a theater. The illusionist is doing tricks to his assistant, but the effect, the meat and potatoes of what they're doing is in the audience's minds. So what these false flag events happen because they're psychological warfare. They're designed to distort your perception of reality, create some type of anxiety, and then provide some type of solution, some pill, something that you're going to yearn for and want to have happen. And that's why these guys are so good at doing what they're doing, because they're ancient psychologists. They know how to manipulate human consciousness. They've been doing it for thousands of years, and they've gotten very good at doing it through mass media and various other forms.
What's new over at Stillness in the Storm? Before I let you go and say goodnight, what are you guys talking about over there?
Oh boy, well, we're doing a lot of cool stuff. Let me see. I actually pulled up a couple stories that I wanted to just mention with you because they're really interesting. There was 2 sets of mysterious booms that happened earlier this summer. One was on July 3rd, and the other was on July 23rd. This one that happened on July 3rd. That was in Tennessee, and it was a massive explosion or some type of loud boom. The USGS claimed that it was a nearby quarry blast, but then the quarry in question, the person who was contacted there said there was no quarry, and they don't know what the heck they're talking about. And this was a 2.1 Richter scale earthquake, so this isn't a small event. And then we had another one very similar to it on the 23rd near Charleston, South Carolina. And what I thought was interesting about this was that we hear about all this supposed alliance activity, taking out bases, taking out the cabal, and it seems like there could be some type of deep underground military base attacks happening or something to that effect, because the number of booms that has been going on over the past year has just been really interesting. So that's something we've been following.
I'm going through your headlines over here, and we got to get you back on the show. Your headline, Donald Trump implies 9/11 was a controlled demolition. You've got advanced technology reports leaked by Corey Goode, confirmed by leading scientists. And, this was, did you write this one, or was this Mike?
Which one?
The Corey Goode story.
That's Michael Sala, yeah.
Okay, and whistleblower exposes ongoing geoengineering omnicide, and you've got, of course, Hurricane Florence to intensified near to a Category 5 strength, and our 12 nuclear power reactors are in the Carolinas. I find that really interesting, too, as well, and you have some more QAnon stuff. It's all right there at Stillness in the Storm. It's one of the great websites out there. Justin, thank you for not only Stillness in the Storm, but for doing everything that you do. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Jimmy. And real quick, if anybody is in California in the Inverness area, I'll be at the Portal to Ascension conference from the 4th to the 7th of October. They'll have live stream tickets available. Go ahead and check out portaltoascension.com. And, of course, you can find me at stillnessinthestorm.com.
Justin Deschamps. Thank you so much, my friend.
Take care, Jimmy. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Justin Deschamps, and it is stillnessinthestorm.com. The links are always over at Jimmy Church Radio, and you can click on it right there. Yes, Portal to Ascension, and that is October 5th through the 7th, right here in Southern California, and the links are over at stillnessinthestorm.com. I'm going to take a quick break and open up all of the phone lines. When I come back, I'll take your phone calls. Stay with me.
Hey, what up, y'all? It's your girl Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires. This year we've experienced more than our fair share. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and last month I decided to make sure my family does not have to worry about food should we get caught in a real emergency situation. Introducing Numana, a healthy, storable product that tastes so good that you'll want to eat it every day instead of just during those times of duress. All Numana products have a 25-year shelf life, are MSG and GMO-free, no preservatives, and are made in America. With the Numana pack in your home, you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you've protected your family. Not only have I tasted and tested, I own it. Now you can too. Just click on the Numana banner on JimmyChurchRadio.com and use the promo code Jimmy when you order. In addition to a discount, we'll send you an autographed Fade to Black t-shirt. Seriously, go Beckley Teppy. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I take Life Change Tea supplements every single day. It's what I do. Click on their banner at JimmyChurchRadio.com. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Yes, River Moon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Just click on the banner at JimmyChurchRadio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy.
Hi, folks. CBD is the home run hitter for health right now. Why, you ask? Because of what it does for the body. Unfortunately, I can't tell you all about the benefit. You know, there's reasons. Do your due diligence and log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Ancient Life Oil uses organic ingredients and is blended in coconut oil for some of the best benefits. Legal in 50 states and non-psychoactive. Log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and my family is safe because of Numana Emergency Food Storage. Just go to the Numana banner at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Promo code Jimmy10.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
It's It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I want to thank Justin Deschamps coming in tonight discussing all aspects of 9/11, September 11, 2001. Show's dedicated to Jim Mars. And I'm going to go to the phones here. Let's go to area code 571. You're up first here on Fade to Black. Who's calling?
Hey, Jimmy. This is David in Virginia.
Hi, David in Virginia. How are you?
I'm just fine. My speaker friends encouraged me to call in. I've got to tell you where I was on 911, but first I want to tell you we're filling sandbags ready for Florence here in Virginia. But
yeah. That's. I hope you're safe. That goes without saying.
I think I will be. I'm near Washington, D.C., and it's just going to be a lot of rain and flooding for us. But I was in the Pentagon on 911. I worked there and was in center court. And, I like to say I saw the plane hit. I've seen video of it hit, but I don't know if it's real video. I do know the day after, they confiscated all the video from the gas station that's across the street that has a camera, all the security cam video that was in all the Pentagon security booths, all the day after. But I saw some of that video. Whether it's real or not, I don't know. So when I was in... Go ahead.
Wait a minute. So you were in center court. You were in the center of the Pentagon, in the where they have you can...
Yeah, the little hamburger stand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's where I was.
And
I'm a smoker, so I was out there smoking a cigarette.
What was your job? What did you do there?
Well, I still work for the Department of Defense, but back then I was a computer guy working for the DOD comptroller, the people who do the DOD budgets.
Right.
I don't do that now. I work for the Air Force now, but still IT person.
What did you hear? What did you see?
So there we were in my office in the basement of the Pentagon, and, we knew about the first plane hitting the towers. And I thought, oh, what's that? I don't know if you remember, but like the week before, there was this story about this private pilot guy who fell asleep and his plane sailing westward across America, and, nobody's flying it. And I don't remember what happened to that story. It's like the pilot was unconscious or something. But when the plane hit the towers, I thought, what, did that happen again? And we're talking about it, and then the second one hit. I'm like, no way, what's going on here?
Right.
And that's when I decided I'm going to go out to center court. Because out in center court, like I said, I was out there smoking a cigarette. You get to talk. There's lots of different people smoking, high-level people, different branches of the military, and, information kind of gets passed in center court because you're with all the... So I'm out there and we're talking about it, and it's about 9:30 a.m. and planes would fly over the Pentagon, just over the eastern side all the time, landing at National Airport. You'd always see that.
Mm-hmm.
But this plane I spotted was like westerly, way up high. And I actually made a joke because it was circling, and I'm like, that's not landing. And I made a joke. Oh, here's another one inbound to the Pentagon. At that time, it was a joke because it was, probably it was way up, way out to the west. And then all of a sudden it started heading towards us. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, oh, shit, there is a plane coming at the Pentagon. And from center court, if I'm looking up, you got to know that my line of sight, you know what I mean? I'm looking at the roof of the inner ring, at some point that airplane went below that roof line, so I couldn't see it anymore. But it was circling, and then I lost my line of sight as it went below the horizon line of this building, because I'm looking up. And then like 2 seconds after that, the loudest noise and nuclear mushroom bomb I've ever seen in my life. Just this black cloud went up with rolling red fire in it. It was the meanest looking and the loudest noise I've ever heard in my life. And then I heard zing just past my ears. It was the tiles and the glass of the inner ring got blasted out and came flying by us. And my first thought is the debris from that black mushroom cloud is going to come raining down on us. So everybody tried to run for these little overhangs. And I can remember I ran in the opposite direction as everybody around me to get under this overhang. And you got to give it to the military, because if I'm running behind this military, I'm a contractor. This military guy, we all ran, and then his military training kicked in, because then he stopped, he turned around and went straight into the fire. He turned, I guess he at first thought, save myself, and then he thought, I'm going to see, he went towards the side that got hit. But I can't say I saw the plane hit, because I'm on the inner ring and it obviously hit on the outer ring. But I saw a plane in an unusual part of the sky circling, and then 2 seconds after it went below the horizon, a giant mushroom cloud. I don't know. Maybe that was a hologram I saw. I don't know.
Okay, well, David, let me ask you a couple of questions here. Yes, did you get outside? What did you? And well, that's the first question. Where did you go next?
Well, the first thing I tried to do was I ran back to my office to tell everybody, "My God, a plane just hit the Pentagon." And I still had my cigarette when I got to the office, like, oh, shit, I'm not supposed to have this.
Okay, watch your language.
I tried to call home.
Okay, go ahead.
I tried to call home, and, of course, all the cell phone signals were jammed. I couldn't call home. And then I started to walk to the metro. I took the metro train, the public transportation, but the Pentagon station was closed. So I walked across the street to what's called Crystal City. It's just some, high-rise buildings across the street. They have a metro entrance. It was just mobbed with people. And finally, I did get a cell phone call through to my brother, who lived in Alexandria, Virginia, and he came and picked me up.
Well, didn't anybody stop you or a question or ask, what you saw? Wasn't there any of that going on?
At the moment of the impact, no. Everybody started running for the doors.
No, I mean afterwards. You were able to freely leave the Pentagon? Nobody stopped you?
Yeah, and on that day I went home. Well, I went to my brother's house in Alexandria, and we turned the TV on and watched it. But the next day, there were reporters all over the place, and they were all wanting to talk to us and ask, what did you see? All my colleagues who were not, they did not see it. I could see them talking to this news station, that news station. I didn't talk to any of them. I didn't want to. It's like it took your speaker friends pulling teeth just to get me to call you.
Well,
I didn't want to talk to them. I was still in shock.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. But what about the area out in front of the Pentagon, which looks like nothing scraped the ground or there wasn't a gouge? Were you able to check that out? Did you walk around and look at the front of the Pentagon where the impact was?
Oh, yeah, I did more than that. But before I say that, on the day it happened, so this explosion happens, and as I'm leaving and I turn around and I look and I see the giant impact and the fire and smoke. But it was like 30 minutes later, a wedge fell down and made this second loud boom that just panicked everybody. It was just, I guess, one of the walls or roofs caved in. But so the day after, the comptroller I worked for, we had a little meeting, and they're all in their rubber gloves and their space suits, and I'm wearing nothing. I'm like 20-something years old, and I'm like, why are you guys wearing hazmat suits and I'm not? And they ordered me to go in there and collect all the computers in that section of the building. And they said, if you see any airplane parts, pick them up and pile them in this pile here. And I did find, like, airplane seat cushions. I found, I don't know, people say there was no airplane parts, but they collected them all up. I got some. They said, put them in this pile. What they did with them, I don't know. But they looked like airplane seat cushions and pieces of metal. They said to us, get all the computers, pull them out, and anything that looks like an airplane part and pile them in this pile. The Pentagon that's got, like, between each ring, it's like an outside section. So it's like we're piling them in between the rings, which was like outside, but it's actually in the building.
Right.
And what they did with that stuff, I don't know, but they had us go in there, and I don't know if it was an airplane seat, but they weren't like office seats. They were, they looked like bus or seats. And, there was just fragments of it and pieces of metal. I forget which color. They're like any kind of metal. Might have just been white metal, and had us pile it all in a stack in this place in between Pentagon rings, which was like outside really, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a little courtyard in between.
Well, not the courtyard, but yeah, each ring
has an open area.
An open out. I mean, you can look up and see the sky, but actually not anymore. It's all closed off now. And the other comment I wanted to make is the section it hit was just freshly renovated. There were not many people. They were just starting to move back in. It was all reinforced, freshly renovated. And, I don't believe the 911 report, and I think our government knew something, and something stinks about the whole story. Like freshly renovated, like what a perfect time to plant explosives and stuff, if something like that did happen.
But
they
David,
could have done it during the renovation. Yes,
David, I have a question here. If you were able to find pieces of seat cushions and seats, what about body parts? Weren't there any bodies?
There were.
Well,
and I was instructed not to touch that. I didn't see a lot of that, but I know other colleagues said they came across some. But I will say this, the next day, I went to work on that Wednesday. There were what I imagine were bodies under white sheets in center court. So we were not sent in there to get bodies, but somebody was there all night long getting bodies, because the next day there were bodies in center court. It was like a makeshift morgue. There seemed like, I don't know, 20 or 30, quite a few white sheets that were probably bodies. But I didn't see any when I went in there, probably because it was the next day that I'm sent in there to get computers. It was probably that previous night that they were pulling bodies out. But it was a terrible day, and
what about shoes or clothes or luggage? I mean, did you see anything like that?
The part of the building that was deemed unsafe to go in, it was the day after, which was, I wasn't allowed to go in. It was all the way up, like there was still walls and structure. I mean, I didn't go into where there was probably just cinder and ash.
How did these parts get into your part of the building? You were working for the comptroller. You were a computer guy. How did these parts get into your offices? Were below where the impact site was? I'm trying to understand.
My office was in the basement on the opposite side.
Right.
But my client, the comptroller, they were in offices all over the Pentagon, but primarily on the E-ring. The comptroller herself was on the E-ring on the opposite side, but we had some offices that were right next to the part that got hit, and they were sending me in to get our computers, the comptroller computers, and we had like 6 or 8 offices that were, like half a corridor away from this corridor that got demolished. And so I wasn't actually walking through the ash and cinder of where all the firemen were still there the next day. That thing smoldered for a few days, if I remember. And I also remember lots of water. There was water damage throughout the Pentagon from all the fire hoses and stuff, and that, like half the Pentagon was leaking water. But I just wanted to let people know there was a plane circling coming towards the Pentagon, and then there was an explosion. But my eyeballs didn't actually see the plane hit because obviously I'm on the E-ring and it's on the outside of the building. I just saw it coming in at full speed, and then just as it went below the horizon, like 5 seconds later, this huge, like, nuclear mushroom cloud just rolling up in the air. And what else happened that day? I mean, a lot of events happened, and
wow. Well, I want to thank you for calling in, and maybe another show will take this a little bit further, but I really appreciate that. And you're the first person that I have talked to that was there that day. So there you go.
And they made a point of making us come to work because I didn't want to come to work. And I think it was all that we got to show the enemy they can't knock us out. We're back to working the next day.
Wow.
Or it was just because they knew they were going to send me in there to grab all their computers and see if they found any plane parts. And the only plane part I found was a piece of metal and like half of a cushion that looked like it could be a plane seat. And we were told to pile it up in this place. There was a pile that we got that would like half fill a dumpster.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just these, 8 or 9 people working for the comptroller they sent on in there. Who knows who else was in there sanitizing the evidence,
Right.
But I think it's interesting how it hit the renovated section. The one that they planted all their little incendiary devices in the walls and everything, so it would burn real good when the event happened.
Wow.
But,
wow.
And like I said, there was not a lot of people, and they were just starting to move back in. Otherwise, there would have been many more died in the Pentagon. I forget what the number was, but it would have been way more if it was fully staffed and people had moved back into their newly renovated office. But they were just starting to move back in, which is sort of coincidental, and I don't believe in coincidences, that it hit that section.
Right.
That they knew was the sparsely populated section.
Did you know anybody that died in the Pentagon?
I had some acquaintances that died in the Pentagon, and even some of there was on the airplane that hit, there was some like school children, and a friend of mine's kid got killed. Was one of the students. There was like a classroom of kids on that airplane, but they weren't friends that I knew. They were acquaintances that I knew from working at the Pentagon there, like 2 or 3 people I knew. And they have, and still have, memorials every year. I still work at the Pentagon sometimes. It's from there or Andrews Air Force Base or this other Air Force Base. But I'm at the Pentagon periodically. But the years after, when I was still working there and they'd have their 9/11 commemoration and they'd have a flyover, people would complain about that because people would freak out. You know, a year later and airplanes are flying over and it was a commemoration, but people would freak out still. People were shell-shocked. A lot of people couldn't go back to work after that day. But anyway.
Wow, thank you.
I was there.
Yeah.
It happened.
Well, thank you for that. Did the were you ever asked to come in and give a debrief? And I would imagine that, I mean, every Pentagon employee had to discuss this and then also maybe sign off non-disclosure agreements that you wouldn't discuss this with anybody else?
We had a meeting with our client, the comptroller, that mostly it was to, is anybody upset? We offer counseling and that kind of thing. I wasn't told about don't tell anybody this, that, or the other type of thing. I was you would think don't mention you found plane parts or something like that, but they wouldn't say that. They didn't want to be obvious about it. They didn't care what I say. I'm a nobody. Go ahead, David. Tell them you collected plane parts, because they knew if they said something to me, then they'd be admitting they knew something. So they didn't do that. They just knew, do your job, and if you ever speak of it, nobody's going to believe you anyway or something. I don't know. But no, we weren't officially told that. We had a meeting, and mainly it was if you need counseling and that. But I will say this, security changed after that day. We were all issued gas masks. Where we used to just be able to walk in and flash our badge, and a guard would look at it, they got rid of that, and then it became like smart cards you had to swipe. The security really tightened up after that day at the Pentagon. And I mean, you used to be able to, when I was a kid and my dad worked there, anybody could walk into the Pentagon. It was a public mall,
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. And over at Fort Ben Harrison, I remember specifically the finance center at Fort Ben Harrison that cuts all of the checks for all of the military. Every branch, every paycheck comes out of there, right? And it's a huge building. When I was a kid, I walked in and out of there like it was nothing. And it's probably the size of the Pentagon. It's huge. Golf carts, the whole thing, the wide hallways with the stripes and this ginormous building. But I walked in and out of there all the time. All the time. I never got stopped. Well, listen, David, I got to get out of here. I got to roll credits. Thank you for all of that tonight. And no
problem.
And we'll take it further on another show. I'd like to talk to you more about all of this.
Will do. I listen to you every night.
Thank you so much.
Weekends.
Thank you so much, David.
Bye-bye.
Man, you got it. And to have a phone call like that, somebody that was at the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001, to call into this show and talk about the impact and what he went through at that very moment. That's what this show was all about. I want to thank David for having the courage to call in tonight. And there you go. And that wraps our very special 9/11 September 11th special event with Justin Deschamps. Again, dedicating this show to Jim Mars. Faded Black's executive producer is Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Faded Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast owned and copyrighted 2018 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, right here, Kelly, Sullivan, Walden. That's right. Dreams all night long and your phone calls. Until then, I want everybody to be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.